now that we know where we are, we know where we're going, we know we got to at least think about credit and how to improve it and how to manage debt. Once we have this base established and we've covered worst case scenarios, that becomes the base of your financial planning priority pyramid.
Okay.
We need to make sure that our essentials are covered and our emergencies and worst case scenarios are covered. Even if we don't have all the insurance coverage, maybe we have some cash reserves to help bridge a gap or cover an unexpected expense. And so between having an emergency fund as well as having the right insurances, we all probably have health insurance coverage, but making sure our home is insured, and if we're renting, making sure we have appropriate rental insurance. Which,
What's that?
Exactly. I mean, I remember when I was renting back in the day, I never thought about rental insurance. Now, today, a lot of property managers and landlords will require it, which is smart because you really should have it because it can help cover stuff that's lost, stolen, if there's some natural disaster, it floods above you, a fire, right? There's a fire and everything gets destroyed. You can replace a lot, if not all of your stuff. So it's important to have that. Life insurance, especially if you have people depending on you and your income, and you guys are in high risk jobs. So that's definitely important. And fortunately, you work for the city. You have great group benefits available to you at no extra cost or a nominal extra cost in some cases. If you wanted to add more life insurance coverage than what the city offers you at no cost, you can do that at a fraction of what it would cost to buy it outside of work. And you can buy it without having to be approved for it like you would outside of work. And because you're in such a risky line of work, there's a good chance you wouldn't even be approved outside of work. So all of you should definitely be looking to maximize your group life insurance coverage, as well as your group disability insurance. The city offers both short-term and long-term disability coverage, which will cover up to a portion of your full-time earning income for a short-term period of time or potentially a long-term period of time. So that's really important because 1 in 4 of us, well, not me, 1 in 4 20-year-olds today will experience, studies show, a long-term disability in their career by the time they're age 1 in 4 by age 65. And as I mentioned before, I think there is a much greater likelihood that one of us will have to or can't work for an extended period of time because of a disability, much more so than dying early. So disability insurance is arguably more important than even life insurance. Then once you have those worst case scenarios covered, then you can start proactively planning and saving for longer term goals and investing for longer term goals. And then at the top of the pyramid, now we're getting fancy. Now you can start investing in Bitcoin and individual stocks and spreading out your investments and buying up real estate and all that fun stuff. I know it's very tempting, especially for you younger folks, with all the social media noise and stuff you hear from your colleagues and your family members and your friends. Oh, you got to get into cryptocurrency and you got to buy the latest meme stock and I heard this on Reddit and whatever. But if you don't have an emergency fund, if you don't have $1,000 in the bank for emergencies, and if you're not contributing anything to your deferred compensation plan, you should not be investing in cryptocurrency.
I'm glad you brought up deferred compensation plan because it's right there in the second tier, right? Under retirement savings. Explain to me what's so beneficial about a deferred compensation plan. Because I know our members mostly hear about it, usually from the older generations, like you got to do it.
Right.
But no one understands why.
That's right.
So tell me why.
Because those older generations know firsthand that the pension and Social Security are not enough to cover your expenses by the time you get close to retiring and being in a position to leave full-time employment with the city. You're probably going to have to keep working for another 10, 15, 20 years because those fixed income sources, which are fixed, which means they're limited and they're out of your control, are not going to be enough for you to live comfortably in retirement. If you want to continue living paycheck to paycheck, it might be enough. But most of us do not want to live paycheck to paycheck. And we want to get to the point where we can really live life to the fullest and do all the fun stuff that we haven't been able to afford to do or haven't had the time, or, we just want to have more luxuries and fun. So putting something extra away in an account that is tax advantaged, like deferred comp. And what I mean by tax advantaged is you can put the money in pre-tax, so you don't pay taxes on the money going in if you're doing a traditional 457 contribution. You also have the option for after tax, but I'll get into that a little bit later. But it grows tax deferred, meaning that the interest that you earn through your investments, and I'll talk about your investment options in a little bit as well, the interest that you accumulate compounds because you never have to pay taxes on the interest. So you have this snowball effect with your balance. And if you're putting in a little bit over a long enough period of time, that balance is going to go like this. And by the time you're eligible for retirement, not only are you going to have your pension, you're probably not going to be old enough to qualify for Social Security yet. So you have to bridge a gap, by the way. And that's where your deferred comp comes in, to bridge that gap until you can qualify for Social Security.
Okay. So a veteran member once told me when he told me, and I was like a year in, I think I just got off probation before I bought the truck. It's like, you need to put some money into your deferred comp. He said at least $50 a check. And then every time you get promoted, put in another 100. So what is, in terms of an equation on how much we should put into a deferred comp, does that go back to knowing what you're worth and then the 5 steps that we talked about?
Yeah, I mean, you could do it blindly and just say, I'm going to put in $50 a paycheck, and that's probably what you should do.
That's what I did do.
That's smart, right? Because you're like, okay, I'll do what he says. Yeah. And I love working with fire and police because the young cadets and young career folks, they listen to whatever their directors tell him to do. And so I could always rely on the older, wiser, wish I had done that back then, to force the young, new trainees to force themselves into that good habit of putting the money away. How much you can actually afford? Yes. I mean, ideally, you have your net worth statement and your budget, and you have a clear understanding of your cash flow and where you have opportunity to put in more. But if you want to just throw a dart at the board, force yourself to start somewhere, starting is the best thing you can do, even if it's at the minimum amount, although I would probably recommend going a little bit over the minimum. And I think the minimum is still, if I remember correctly, just $10 a month. Don't do that, though. Do at least $25, if not $50 a month. And I'll show you in a few more slides what the paycheck impact actually is, because if you're doing it pre-tax, it's going to not feel as much coming out of your take-home pay versus whatever you're deferring, and how much you can potentially accumulate based on how much you're deferring. So I mentioned the power of compounding interest, and it is extraordinarily powerful. In fact, I think it was Albert Einstein who said that compounding interest is the most magical thing on earth. And why is that? It's because if you're smart enough and disciplined enough, young enough to just put something small away, that could actually be enough to get you to have way more in the long run versus someone who starts late and doesn't listen to their directing officer, whatever you're called, and is trying to catch up. So in this illustration, we're looking at investor 1 in the green. She starts at age 25. She only puts $5,000 away for 10 years, and then she stops. She totally stops contributing. Versus investor 2 in the gray, who starts 10 years later at 35, puts in $5,000 per year for 30 years. So 20 years longer, ends up with less than the smart investor who just started early because of compounding interest.
In simplistic terms, the earlier the better for our firefighters.
The earlier the better.
To start putting in.
Absolutely. Yep. Even if, they're starting young and then maybe they're now married, they have a growing family, they bought a house and their expenses have increased and they can't afford that deferral anymore. I'm not suggesting they turn off their contributions ever, but maybe they need to dial back their contributions, which you can do, by the way. You can turn off, turn on, change your deferral amount at any time. So if they can only do that amount for an initial period of time, just starting earlier is the best thing they can do.
Okay.
So that is really cool. And going back to your question of $50 a pay and what can that do for me in the long run, and talking about the difference between a deferral amount and how much out of your take-home pay you can expect, it's different because if you're doing a pre-tax contribution, remember the money is going in pre-tax. You're not paying taxes on the money. So your actual take-home pay is not affected as much as how much you're deferring. So all the way on the left-hand side, you see deferral per pay. And this chart happens to start with $25, but $50 is the second line there. Your paycheck impact, if you're in a 25% tax bracket, is only $37.50. And so how much you're going to reduce your annual pay at $50 a pay is only $975 the course of the year. But you can potentially accumulate close to $20,000, $55,000, $127,000 if you're contributing just that amount over that period of time. And so this is a really easy...
That's just based on 7%.
And that's right, based on 7% annual rate of return. And it's assuming no changes in that deferral amount.
Okay. So
ideally, you start small and you get into the habit, maybe force yourself to increase that contribution once a year.
Annually.
Annually.
Okay.
So maybe on your birthday or January 1st, you go online and you increase it by 1%.
Okay.
And that's going to help you get to those accumulation amounts much quicker. And if you do small bumps more frequently, you're not going to feel it as much. I worked with so many employees who started with the minimum, and then 20 years later, we're trying to catch up and try to do $500 a paycheck. And that hurts when you're not used to that much coming out of your take-home pay.
Right.
So if you do it, small increases regularly, it's going to be a lot less painful. So
annually increase your deferred comp by at least the minimum.
Yeah, and I think you can do a percentage now.
Okay.
And that would be my recommendation, to elect a percentage deferral amount instead of a set dollar amount. Do you know why, Miguel?
No, I did not.
Because if you're eligible for overtime or pay raises or promotion, it's automatically going to pull that higher deferral amount based on a percentage contribution than a set dollar amount.
So through raises and through benefits we have through our contract, whether it be longevity, it's gonna translate into that higher percentage.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that's a easy way to force yourself to put more away when you, in theory, can afford to put more away and should be putting more away. Yeah.
Okay.
So the next question you might ask is, well, if we're making contributions into the 457 or we're considering it, how do we know what to invest in? And these are actually your choices. You technically have 4, although I would argue you really should stick with the 1, which is the easy fund choice, because then you don't have to think about it.
I've never thought about it.
Perfect. So you have probably automatically been invested in a fund that is a blend of lots of different types of investments. Stock investments, bond investments, depending on how close you are to retirement or not so close. If you're further from retirement, you're going to be more aggressively blended.
Right.
The closer you get, the more or less aggressive it becomes automatically. So the easy fund choice is the default investment option. If you don't choose anything on your own, they will default you, the program will, in what's called a target retirement date fund.
Okay.
And it's nice because you have the convenience of having professionals choose and manage your funds for you and have it automatically become less risky the closer you get to likely needing to start taking withdrawals. So you don't have to worry about, when should I move my investments? It's done for you. And you don't have to worry about wasting time worrying about it. You can focus on the other things that you're going to be stressed about. So they do have 3 other options, though. If you like to be more in control of your funds and you're a fund picker, or consider yourself to be, or striving to be, you can pick from the menu of options. But
based on risk.
Right. So they will be listed typically from least aggressive to most aggressive.
Okay.
Now, most of us will look at the most recent performance and make picks based on what has most recently performed the best. And I mentioned at the beginning in my disclosure that past performance is not a guarantee of future results. So you need to be really careful about that. We are, as humans, so easily tempted to chase returns when it comes to investing. But for you and I, for us average investors, by the time we hear about something trendy and try to invest in it, it's already peaked and it's going to go right down after we start investing in it. So I strongly suggest sticking with a well-balanced, broadly diversified fund, which the easy fund default option does for you. Okay. There are other options, but I'm not even going to talk about them because I don't recommend them. Yeah. They're more expensive and it requires more time and knowledge that most of us don't have. We will get into a little more complicated discussion about deferred comp with one of our members who's kind of a subject matter expert on deferred comp and para. So just for all you people out there, we're going to have more conversations about deferred comp at a later time. Perfect. And just another illustration of how the default option in the 457 deferred comp plan works. It's known as a target retirement date fund. Okay. Also known as set it and forget it fund. So if we know about that. If you're like Miguel and you don't want to think about it, you don't know, you don't care, just let the default option do its work. How it works, the system will pick the fund that matches your retirement date. Now, FYI, it's going to assume your retirement at age 65. So I know that many of you, if not most of you, are eligible to retire a lot sooner than that. However, you're probably going to continue to work in some way, shape, or form, even after you leave the department to age 60, maybe age 65. But you're going to still need stock exposure and growth potential to keep your money growing enough to bridge retirement at 45 or 50 until 85, 90, however long you may live. So I would suggest just sticking with the default option that it puts you in. I think the fire members and the police, they get hung up too much on worrying about it perfectly aligning with their retirement age, and you shouldn't worry about that. Okay, all right. So it puts you in a fund automatically. The fund will automatically reduce risk as you age and you get closer to retirement, and it helps you keep on track for retirement. So it's easy, low hassle. You don't have to worry about picking. And then what do we do once we retire? You spend it on, like a vacation, right? Like a big vacation. Oh, yeah. You spend it all right away. Or the 4 weddings that I have. I got 4 daughters. So. Oh, my God. So you need a dedicated high-yield savings account. Yes, that's a different conversation. For that. But those unique situational needs, wants, wishes, that is a key part of holistic financial planning, which is what I do. Okay. And when I say holistic, that means figuring how all the pieces of your financial life and your future security fit together based on your specific goals and your particular family situation. So you have 4 daughters. Not everybody is lucky enough to have 4 daughters. So lucky. You probably want to be saving something now for weddings, plural. Whoops. But one thing I didn't mention about the deferred compensation plan, and I'll go back. The 457 plan is like a 401k in the private sector, but it is unique because it is designed to not penalize you, public sector employees, to withdraw if you're under age 59 and a half. Okay. So that is probably the biggest differentiator and advantage with a 457 plan is that, yes, you have to pay income tax on withdrawals if you've only contributed pre-tax, but there's no early withdrawal penalty with a 457 plan. Above age what? 59 and a half. So if you were to cash in after 59 and a half, you would have the normal penalties? No. Okay. There's no penalty associated with a 457. Zero penalty. Okay. There's still potential income tax that you have to pay on withdrawals because remember, if you're contributing pre-tax, you haven't paid taxes on the money going in. Right. It's growing and compounding interest tax deferred. You don't pay taxes on the growth. So eventually the government's going to want to get paid something. And in the case of a tax deferred account, you're paying it on the back end in exchange for an upfront tax break. But again, deferred comp in public sector 457 plans has that no early withdrawal penalty. So as long as you separate from service, whether it's at retirement technically, or you quit or you get fired or whatever, that separation of service qualifies you to have full access to whatever you've accumulated in your deferred comp. That's another reason why you want to start saving for it now, because having that extra cushion of cash is really going to be important for you to bridge the gap between this job and whatever's next. So, all right. Oop, I'm going the wrong way. Let's keep going forward. Isn't this easy on the eyes, Miguel? This is fun to look at.
Bingo.
This is just another reiteration of why we should not try to beat the market. And by the market, I mean the stock market.
Explain to me why this means don't try to beat the market.
Because each colored block is a different asset class, a different type of investment. So, for example, let's look at 2008. You and I probably remember it better than some of those just starting in their careers, but 2008 was rough. That was the housing crisis, the Great Recession. Oh, yeah, exactly. That's when you want to buy a house, right? We could only go back.
It's when I bought my first one.
I bought my first house in 2007, right before it crashed. That was great. Anyway, in 2008, stocks did terribly. The U.S. stock market was down over 37%. The international stock market was down over 46% or 47%, I think it was. What was the best performing asset class in 2008? Bonds, fixed income. So maybe if you were a retiree and you were in a 100% bond portfolio, you didn't
suffer.
You didn't worry so much.
Yeah.
But if you look at the bottom of 2008, you see that lavender box. EM means emerging market.
Oh, okay.
Emerging market equity. So we're talking about stocks and companies in underdeveloped or developing countries.
All right.
So China is still somehow considered that. India, Brazil, Singapore, those types of countries. It was the worst performing asset class. It was down over 53%. If you look at what the top performing asset class was the year before
and after.
Yeah. But what do you think most people did who were invested in emerging markets in 2008?
Most people did was...
They bailed.
Yeah, they got out.
Most people bailed, and so they missed out on the recovery.
Okay.
So the point is, if you look back and you squint, these color blocks are all over the map. How can you know?
I can.
How do you know where to put your money in any given year? You don't. And so your best bet is to just have a well-balanced portfolio. And again, that's what the target date funds do for you. And that's what those white blocks represent and the lines connecting them. That you're going to have much less volatility, which means the up and down swings in market performance, if you use a more balanced portfolio. Again, don't try to beat the market. This is showing diversification and 20-year annualized returns by those different asset classes. The best performing investment has been REITs, which are real estate investment trusts. So these are funds that pool all different types of real estate, and it allows retail investors to invest in real estate without having to come up with the capital and the large cash that you typically need to buy property. So they're a great asset class. I wouldn't recommend going into them 100% because they can also be one of the most risky and volatile asset classes. It just so happens in the last 20 years, they've been the best performing, but they have taken serious hits in some years. But you can see the orange bar represents you and I, the average investor trying to beat the market and DIY. So again, sticking with a 20-40 blend or maybe just going into the S&P 500 index fund is going to be your best bet for enough growth to significantly outpace inflation. And I have highlighted in red there, current inflation rate for this year, I mentioned this before, is 5.4%. So quite a bit more than that average over the past 20 years. Now it is expected to calm back down, but that average is probably going to go up starting next year to 3% or more. So we need our money to grow ahead of whatever that average inflation rate is so that we can afford what things are going to cost 20, 30 years from now in retirement. So that's why we need our money to work hard enough and earn returns great enough to outpace that rate of inflation. but without necessarily taking on too much risk if we don't have to.
All right.
Which I'm saying you don't. All right.
Yeah, you mentioned Roth earlier versus the traditional deferred comp that I have.
Yeah.
What's a Roth?
So your deferred comp has both a traditional opportunity as well as a Roth opportunity. The difference between the two, your traditional pre-tax, tax deferred comp allows you to put your money in pre-tax. You get the upfront tax break. Okay. So it helps you reduce your taxable income this year and every year that you're deferring. And it grows tax defer. You don't pay taxes on the growth. But then what happens when you start taking money out? Right. You have to pay taxes on it. Now you have an option where you can take the tax hit now. And this is probably more or most appropriate for you younger employees who are making the least they're going to make in their career with the department, if not elsewhere. And so taking the tax hit now, betting on taxes likely going up in the future and not wanting to worry about what taxes are going to be and what the tax impact on those withdrawals down the road in retirement are going to be like, you might want to go the Roth option.
Okay. So you just tax it before instead of getting taxed after.
So you can see the top is go traditional. If you're in a higher tax bracket now and you expect your tax bracket to drop, and this is typical of those closer to retirement who are at their higher or highest earning years now, but then they're going to be, in most cases, or maybe not most now, but many cases, living on a fraction of their full-time income, although that's changing more and more every year, that more retirees are living on the same amount of income or more in retirement. So that might not work out for you if you're expecting your taxes to be lower in retirement. But it could make sense in that case to go traditional. Take the tax break now, lower your taxable income, not worry about it later. Versus probably more of the younger folks, take the tax hit now because you're not making that much. You're not going to have to pay that much in taxes and not worry about taxes forever in the future.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And again, I've recommended to many clients to split their contributions. If they're not sure and they want to have some tax break now and some tax break later, you could think about splitting your contributions and doing half or a certain percentage into the pre-tax deferred comp bucket, and then doing half into the Roth 457.
I didn't even know it was an option.
Yes. And by the way, for those of you who didn't know it was an option and have been doing pre-tax this whole time and are now maybe second guessing or thinking they want to go Roth, you also have the option to do what's called in-plan Roth conversions. So you can actually take money that's pre-tax and convert it to your Roth deferred comp, but you have to pay taxes on the amount that you convert in the year that you convert it. So it is an option, but depending on your tax situation now and how much you have to cover the taxes that would be owed on that conversion next year, it might be worth it or it might not make sense, but that is an option. I did want to highlight that the limits, if you're in a fortunate enough position to max out your deferred comp contributions, that max limit is going up next year. So it is $19,500 for the calendar tax year in 2021. It's going up by $1,000 next year. So you have as much as $20,500. If you're over age 50, you can put $6,000 more in. So $6,500. So it's actually $27,000 if you're over age 50. But every little bit extra certainly helps in the long run. And I did want to mention that with the 457, in addition to being unique and not having that early withdrawal penalty associated with it, it also has a special catch-up feature where for those of you closer to retirement or at least eligible retirement, you have to be 3 years.
Okay, so for those of us that are eligible to retire at 20 years, it's 17. For those of us eligible at 25, it would be 22.
Exactly. So for 3 years leading up to your eligible full retirement, according to PARA, not Social Security, you can put in double the current annual limit. It's a bit complicated, but if you were eligible this year and you were under age 50, the current limit is 19,500. I showed on that last slide. You could put in as much as what's 19.5 times 2, 39,000 for this calendar year, and for the next 2 years, assuming your full para eligible age is in 2024. You can only do it technically up until the year that you're reaching full retirement age.
So you can do it after.
You can't do the special catch-up after. If you continue to work past your full retirement, you can still do the annual limit or the 50-plus catch-up if you're over age 50.
But not the 39.
Not the special catch-up. That's only limited to a maximum of 3 years.
Right now you're speaking to me because I'm 17 and a half years into my career. So I should have started this double back in July, started in July 2004, and then I could do 3 years of this to maximize my deferred comp.
Yes. So in most cases, it's going to be your best opportunity to squirrel away extra tax-advantaged reserves for retirement. And especially for someone like you in your position where you're going to be really relatively young at retirement and probably far off from being eligible, even eligible to claim your early Social Security benefit, you're going to need to bridge the gap.
Yep.
And so maybe you'll do that through continuing to work somewhere. But wouldn't it be nice to have this extra bucket of money that you can take out penalty-free and use it to not have to work as much or for as long? And so you can put in as much as $39,000 next year. Because that limit is going up by $1,000, you'll be able to put $40,000 in. Right. And there's an eligibility process that you have to go through to make sure you qualify for the special catch-up. And you qualify as long as you haven't been maxing out your contributions into deferred comp every year that you've been eligible. And for most of us, we haven't even gone close to maxing out. So most of us in this category to participate have the under-deferred or what they call underutilized deferrals to take advantage of this. Okay. And by the way, Miguel, you can do up to $39,000 this year and $40,000 next year, pre-tax or Roth.
If I convert.
No, if you just change your contribution percentage from the pre-tax account to the Roth 457. Okay. So that's a shift you might want to take advantage of the last few years that you have left here to build up a bucket of potentially tax-free reserves in addition to your tax-deferred reserves. Now, one key point with that, in order to take out money from a Roth totally tax-free, you have to have had the account open for at least 5 years. Okay. And you have to be over age 59 and a half. Okay. So Roths are long-term. They're long-term investments, yeah. And that's going to give you the maximum compounding interest opportunity if you leave them untouched for as long as possible.
Gotcha.
So you should consider those to be later retirement buckets. But at that point, you won't have to worry about taxes when you take money out of them. So that'll be really cool.
That sounds